Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
There's two different approaches you can take when it comes to managing your rental properties. You can be really hands-on and you can manage the properties yourself, or you can outsource the management to a professional property management company and let them find the tenants and do all the day-to-day activities to manage the rental properties. And you can take on a role more as an investor than a landlord. And that's what my guest today is doing. He's built a really large portfolio on the side. He's got a full-time job, and on the side, he's been buying rental properties, and he's built this enormous portfolio that doesn't require any of his time or attention. So we're going to hear his story. I think you're going to find it pretty amazing. So let's take a real quick break. We'll come back in 30 seconds, and we'll meet Paul Morris from Los Angeles.
Are you looking for a roadmap to financial freedom? If so, we have a solution for you. Norada Real Estate is offering a limited number of free strategy sessions to help you get out of the rat race. Learn how you can create wealth and build monthly passive income. To set up a time with one of our knowledgeable investment counselors, simply go to noradarealestate.com. That's NORADA realestate.com.
Hey, Paul, welcome to the podcast. So why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started investing in real estate?
Sure. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and was in a, blue collar to lower middle class income family. And I had one rich cousin, sort of an older guy, kind of like the rich, quote, rich uncle. And I watched him build a lot of wealth through real estate. And my dad dabbled in it a little bit. So that was my real intro from very early on, watching people build wealth through real estate.
Okay. And today you have built just a huge portfolio, all while doing your full-time job, which you have a business that you run. You own a bunch of Keller Williams offices, but you have built your portfolio basically on the side as you're focusing on your business.
Yes, that is correct. Even when I started out, I run a big real estate brokerage firm, but prior to that, I was a lawyer, and as a junior lawyer, you're really working around the clock, and I was still able to do it. I was really able to do it still as a side gig, and it's really, even though it's built a lot of wealth for me, it's still a side gig today, and certainly in terms of time spent.
So let's talk about that. So first of all, tell me about your portfolio. How many doors do you own?
Somewhere right between 600 and 700.
Okay. And that
and
to
also
me,
commercial retail space. Yeah.
That to me sounds like it could be overwhelming. Like, how much time do you spend, say, on an average week with different management issues that are going on with your properties?
Really almost zero. And that's because I have a professional management company that I trust, and I have another layer, which is a business partner who focuses more on this than me. Now, if I were doing this all on my own, it would still be very, very little time, because it's the management company that sits between me and the broken toilet or leaky pipe.
Now, how do you set things up so that you're not getting dragged into things? Like, I'm sure that if you wanted to know about every leaking toilet, they would let you know. But like, how do you let them know, listen, your job is to manage the properties. Just let me know about the big things. But the day-to-day stuff, if a tenant's going to be 3 days late paying rent, you don't necessarily need to know about that. But how do you train them to just take care of things?
Sure. And I will say this, I'll give you, it has been trial and error. That's the great thing about listening to your podcast. And that's that, you can, I can, and your listeners can learn through the experience of others. And I will tell you that along the way, even at a time when I had 250 or 350 or 500 units, Sometimes there would be sort of an oddball unit that I was more interested in than another. For example, my ex-girlfriend had a home in Santa Monica. She decided she was going to rent it. I had 500 doors at the time. Suddenly that one rental unit, because we did not have a professional management company, next thing you know, I'm down there trying to fix a dryer hose, which I'm not very good at. And it created tension. Mm-hmm. And when I had maybe 250 units, I had one oddball unit. I had a condo, and my dad and I just decided, oh, you know what, we'll rent it out instead of doing it through the professional management company. And lo and behold, it was like we created this whole disaster on renting. Two smart people. My dad was very smart, and I had a lot of experience in the space. And like the two smart brains put together, we couldn't rent one condo unit without it being a total disaster. So that's by way of example. And those are two examples of I already had a machine that worked. And it was deviating from that system that took me right back into what your listeners will probably is a reason to stay on the sidelines. They don't want to become mayor of a small town, mm-hmm. which is what you are if you have 40 units and, you're taking all the calls. And I see a lot of people do that. So the idea is to get into business with a management company. And I will give this one tip, and that is management companies. This is why people don't do it regularly. Management companies and the owners have slightly different, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest. And the management company wants everything to go smoothly and get as few calls as possible, and they don't mind spending your money. Mm-hmm. And an owner wants to get it done as well as you can get it done as inexpensively as you can.
Right.
So that's the conflict. But if you work with a company and you're super clear about it and you go, okay, well, the first time that we had a leaky roof on one of I have properties on the East Coast and West Coast. It's dry out here, but back east it's very wet. And the first time we had a leak, and they go, okay, well, let's put a 30-year guaranteed rubber roof. They go, okay, well, what else can we do? Oh, well, we can patch it, but that'll last, that only lasts 2 years. When you do a spreadsheet analysis, it makes sense to keep patching and patching until you really are sprouting a bunch of leaks. So you would say, look, if you want to stay in business with me, here's the way I'm doing things. And then what I do is I get a monthly profit and loss, and I'll look over the monthly profit and loss. I'll watch upticks and downticks in expenditures, and I could call those out. But at this point, I rarely even do that.
So you're not really too concerned with like repair issues that come up because that there's enough cash flow that whatever might come up can just be taken care of by whatever the rental income is for that month.
That's correct. And where the genius, if there's genius, where the genius is in the deals that I do, it's really in the acquisition. It's in buying the property, not buying retail, making sure that I'm doing a value add. And then when I do a value add, there's a lot of upside. I usually don't have a ton of cash flow upside, but I have a ton of equity upside. And the cash flow, as the cash flow increases, it's just taking care of more and more deferred maintenance, or it's taking care of the improvements that I want to do to change the nature of the property.
All right, so when you're buying a property and you're going to fix it up, you're going to do a value add, how do you not get sucked into that just taking over your life with getting involved with smaller decisions or managing the contractors day to day?
Well, so one thing is, and I'll tell you where I do get involved. Post acquisition or post purchase. Well, I would really make this decision before the purchase, but when I'm buying it, I'm really going to decide the scope of the turnaround for the building. And when I say turnaround, I'm talking about the most basic stuff. I'm talking about just paint, carpet, lighting, making sure doors and windows are secured. The way that one thing you didn't ask is generally my philosophy is to buy the worst buildings in the best neighborhoods. Now, it doesn't actually have to be the worst, and it doesn't have to actually be in the best neighborhood. But that's the general philosophy. You can get a feel for it. So I'm definitely not buying a better property in a so-so neighborhood. I'll walk away from that every single time. So I'm buying the ugly ducklings in the better neighborhoods. So that's just the starting point. And then when I buy an ugly duckling, what happens? It's not generating nearly as much cash flow as it could be if it were well maintained. And when someone's selling, they're selling it based on the cash flow that it currently has. And then they'll ask for a premium that's where they think it can go. So you end up paying what seems like a bit more than it's worth at the time.
Coming up on the Rental Income Podcast.
I want to see if Paul thinks it's risky doing what he's doing. I also want to ask him about his state. He lives in California, which is a very landlord-unfriendly state and a tough place to do business. So I want to see if that's been an issue at all as he's built out his rental portfolio. But first, it's time for another landlord pop quiz from our friends over at rentprep.com. Here's today's question. If you run a background check on an applicant, is it legal to just deny that application with a text message or a phone call? The answer is actually no, and that's because of the FCRA, which stands for the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and that says you must issue adverse action when denying an application based on information found in a background report. So the legal and the correct way to deny an applicant is to give them what's called an adverse action letter. And if you check out rentprep.com/Dan, they have a bunch of free resources just for our listeners, including the application denial letter template that you can use to legally deny a tenant applicant. And that's available by going to rentprep.com/Dan. Again, that's rentprep, rentprep.com/Dan. And of course, that's my name at the end. And the best part about these templates is they not only protect you against FCRA claims, but they also direct any issues the applicant has back to the screening company instead of you, the landlord. RentPrep is a tenant screening company that's different from most of the other ones on the market because they have actual FCRA certified screeners in their office who work to make sure that you're protected as a landlord. Check them out and grab a 20% off promo code by going to rentprep.com/Dan and just enter your email to take advantage of all the free resources that they're sharing. That's rentprep.com, rentprep.com/Dan. All right, let's get back to the interview. Now, you own properties in Pittsburgh and in California, and we have a lot of listeners in California, and they tell me that California is a tough place to be a landlord. It's a tough place to do business. It's hard to find cash flowing deals. And on the East Coast, it's a lot easier. Like, from your experience, is that true, or are these excuses that people are coming up with to not do deals?
Mm-hmm. In my experience, absolutely not true. And there is, and let me first validate them and say that from the outside, it certainly appears more difficult to do. I have 3 rules in real estate investing. One of them is buy where you know. That's why, as odd as it sounds, I've been at this a long time. I only own property in Pittsburgh, which is where I lived for 24 years and still have friends and connections and contacts. And Los Angeles is really the only 2. That's where I've lived for the last 15 years. And I've had lots of opportunities to do deals elsewhere. If I could not find a deal where I was, and then, when I was in Washington, D.C., I lived right in the city and DuPont Circle, and it's a tremendously dense urban area. And I had no money. And I bought, and I still bought real estate. The way I did it was I just bought my own house and I used roommates to help pay for the mortgage. So in a very dense area. So there's always a way to do it. And though it appears harder from the outside, I will say this to you. I have a friend who grew up in LA, same age as me, did exactly the same things that I did. I have a 700 unit portfolio. He has a 250 unit portfolio, and his net worth is double mine.
Wow.
And I'm actually a little bit more aggressive than him. If I had been in LA, my net worth would be triple or quadruple. So it appears a little bit harder from the outside, but it isn't. And everything that you say that creates an impediment. For example, I buy places that are rent control. Parts of Los Angeles are rent control, parts are not. I don't shy away from rent control. I build it into my model. Let's pull the lens back to 20,000 foot view. And it ties back in with what I said before about buying retail. If you go to a nice neighborhood in any city, and certainly in places that are very popular like Chicago or New York or Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles or San Francisco, but wherever you are, if you see a really nice building in a really nice neighborhood, there are no impediments. Mm-hmm. Okay, we all agree that's the case. And what I'm telling you is there is very little upside in that. Now, if I had just bought retail my entire career and not spent the time, see, your folks worry about spending the time and energy in repairs and maintenance, which I spend no time on.
Right.
And where I spend time and energy is trying to find wholesale, not retail deals. And I will tell you that if I bought in these major metropolitan areas and just paid retail, I would have crushed it over time. But I'm still not paying. I know that's true, and I'm still not paying retail because I can still find wholesale deals. So you pull the lens out, beautiful building, everything's working well. There's no rent control. There's none of these crazy things. And that drives down the return massively because everybody looks at that deal and they'll go, I'll take it. Now, I'll take it for another $100,000 more. Every dollar more you pay for a deal, it drives the return down.
Right.
So you can, and I'm going to tell you how, right? Just look for a gentrifying neighborhood in an area that you believe is the denser the population, the less likelihood that a downturn in the market is really going to crush it. So I know, Long Beach, which is outside of LA, which used to be a terrible area, is going in the right direction. And if we have a downturn in the market, it's not going to hurt Long Beach.
Right. Now, let's talk about risk, because I think a lot of people would say that it's risky having a big portfolio. But the way I look at it is that I think having one rental property is probably the most risky thing you can do because you're just on this constant roller coaster ride where you're either happy if your tenant's paying or you're depressed if you have an eviction, where it doesn't seem like the day-to-day operation of your portfolio really affects you at all. And it seems like things kind of average out. So do you think there's a lot of risk in having a big portfolio? The
short answer is exactly what you said in the question. Okay. And that is that you're spreading the risk. You're spreading the risk. And I will also tell you that as I get larger, I do sell off the smaller properties. So it may not affect my day-to-day for sure, but my management company and the people that I work with or work for me are less taxed by 7 100 unit buildings, which is not what I have, as opposed to, 70 10 unit buildings, also not what I have. I've moved up from, I started with 4plexes, I went to 6, I went to 12, 24, and on up. And the largest one that I bought was 270 units. So inside of my 700 unit portfolio, I have one that has 270 units. So it's easier to maintain because you have on-site people, and it does. The fewer roofs that you have, the easier it gets to maintain. But you are spreading risk, even going from a single family resident. Well, if you have one single family residence, then your portfolio grows to 10. You have spread the risk. If you have one tenant that leaves, you're not down to zero income.
Now, what about financing? Has it gotten easier or harder to get financing as you've grown your portfolio?
Well, I've been doing it a long time, so it's changed dramatically over time. And right now, I find it to be very difficult to get financing. And let me define difficult. I don't mean that you can't get it. I mean that the paperwork required has gotten totally insane. So my credit worthiness has grown. And, in the last couple of deals that I've done, just banging my head against the wall in terms of, well, send them another document, and also the more complicated the more properties I own, the more a bank wants to see. And then it starts getting, when you have 700 units and you're trying to purchase a fourplex, the amount of analysis they have to do, not I have to do, it gets crazy. So one of the things I have to build in is the time needed to close, because I just know whatever the lender tells me, unless it's somebody that and you've done many, many deals with, whatever they tell me, it's always, it's like working with a contractor. It always takes longer and costs more. It always takes longer.
Well, Paul, you have taught us so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show. If someone wants to learn more, you've written a really good book called Wealth Can't Wait. Why don't you tell us about your book?
Sure. So it certainly contains all the things that we're talking about, but far beyond. So, including the 7 wealth traps, 7 things that people do that stop them from building wealth. The whole first part of it is mindset, and that's just getting yourself to a point where you're ready to take the step. People ask me all the time, for example, isn't the market too hot? So the answers to those questions are in the first part of the book. And then the second part is just taking action. There are a lot of sort of self-help books out there, and I love them and I read them and I love the philosophy, and then I set them down and I go, okay, now what? One of the things that we were really careful to do is to put action steps throughout. And so we've got sort of the mindset, the doing it, and then also the living it or maintaining it. And you can get Wealth Can't Wait on Amazon. And also my website is Morris X, which is my last name, Morris, with the letter X, morrisx.com. And you can find more of my stuff. And I will tell you, Dan, I love your style. I love your questions, and your preparation is no doubt. When you hear something, when you're choosing between podcasts and stuff to listen to, I fully understand why yours come out well. I hope mine has too. But we've done prep for this on a couple of occasions, so I appreciate it.
I appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, we have talked a bit before the show. So yeah, if you missed any of that and you want to get the link to Paul's book or to check out his website, I'll go ahead and put everything on my website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 130. Thanks a lot, Paul. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Dan, thank you. Really appreciate it.